I would like to first thank the Kennedy Center's Millennium Stage and Social Impact Department for hosting us tonight. You really are a great and caring partner. Thank you. I also want to thank you for joining us for a special program with Emi Mahmoud, UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador and award-winning Sudanese-American poet, author, and advocate, along with renowned award-winning journalist Ann Curry. UNHCR is the United Nations agency charged with protecting and assisting refugees, asylum seekers, internally displaced, and stateless people around the world. We were founded in the aftermath of World War II, and more than 70 years later, we continue to work with partners around the globe to help refugees find safety, hope, and home. Today, more than 115 million people have been forced to flee violence, war, or persecution. This number is staggering, and far too many conflicts are proliferating or unrelenting, shattering innocent lives and uprooting people. Sudan, Emi's home country, has been grappling with conflict and forced displacement for decades. Since the fighting erupted last April, armed conflict in Sudan has caused one of the world's largest displacement crises and pushed the region to the brink of humanitarian catastrophe. Over 1.5 million refugees have fled to Chad, South Sudan, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the Central African Republic, while more than 6 million people are displaced inside Sudan's borders. Imagine the entire population of the state of Arizona forced into emergency flight. This crisis has placed significant strains on these surrounding countries, some of which are the poorest in the world, and which were already sheltering large refugee populations and overstretching their meager social services. Intense hostilities, remote and difficult to access locations, and brittle infrastructure make providing help extremely challenging, and the needs far outweigh what is possible to deliver with available resources. The humanitarian crisis is immense, yet organizations like UNHCR and others are working around the clock to provide humanitarian aid to save lives. And the continuing generosity of Sudan's neighbors and donors like the United States provides a ray of hope for those forced to flee. People around the world continue to show extraordinary humanity for refugees in every region by welcoming and helping those in need. Much more must be done to end conflicts, create lasting peace, and remove obstacles so that refugees can rebuild a better future. People are resilient, and they find hope when a helping hand is extended. Emi Mahmoud's tireless work in advocating for refugees and her inspirational poetry underscores the urgency of what refugees face every day and the importance of empathy, safety, and support when it comes to creating a future that welcomes all. Friends, please join me in welcoming Emi Mahmoud to the stage.
Memories of my childhood live between the rings of sand around my ankles and the desert heat in my lungs. I still believe that nothing washes worry from tired skin better than the Nile and my grandma's hands. Every day I go to school with the weight of dead neighbors on my shoulders. The first time I saw bomb smoke, it didn't whine and billow like the heat from the kitchen hearth, but it forced itself on the Darfur sky, smothering the sun with tears that it stole from our bodies. The worst thing about genocide isn't the hunger, the murder, the politics, the government-paid soldiers that chase you across borders and into camps. It's the silence. For 3 months, we closed the schools down because people like us are an eyesore. So the first month, we took it. The second, we waited. The third month, we met underneath the date palm trees, drinking up every second our teachers gave us, turning fruit pits into flaxlands. On the last day, they came with a message, put them in their place. We didn't stand a chance. Flesh was never meant to dance with silver bullets, so we prayed for the sun to come and melt daggers from our backs, lifted our voices up to God till the clouds were spent for weeping and the sand beneath our toes echoed with the song of every soul that ever walked before us. I hid underneath the bed that day with 4 other people. 12 years later, and I can't help but wonder where my cousins hid when the soldiers torched the houses, to the bodies in the wells. So if the weapons didn't get you, the poison would, and sometimes they didn't want to use bullets because it would cost them more than we did. What does it matter? I've seen 16 ways to stop a heart. When you build nations on someone's bones, what sense does it make to break them? In one day, my mother choked on rifle smoke. My father washed the blood from his face. My uncles carried half the bodies to the hospital and the rest to the grave, and we watched. For every funeral we planned, there were 60 we couldn't have. The sand in the Sahara tastes a lot like powdered bone. And when the soldiers came, our blood on their ankles, I remember their laces. Scarlet footprints on the floor. I remember waking to the sound of hushed voices in the night, etched with the kind of sorrow that turns even the loudest dreams to ash. Our parents came home with broken collarbones and the taste of fear carved into their skin, and it was impossible to believe in anything. Fear is the coldest thing in the desert, and it burns you, bows you down to half your height, and owns you. And no one hears you, because what could grow in the desert? Anyway, thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And thank you for listening and for caring and giving us a chance to really bring you into the space of Sudan and what it is we'd like to see happening for our people in the future. That poem, People Like Us, was something that I wrote in college, and it commemorates from the very beginning of the things that happened. A lot of people don't know that at the start of the poem, it's actually the year 2000. 3 years before it was officially declared a genocide. And over time, it tracks what happens to people like us. The first people who were believing us about Darfur were survivors of other genocides, Holocaust survivors, survivors of Rwanda, Bosnia, so many other people coming to join us. A lot of our family from South Sudan and so many others were supporting us, and every time that I go in field with UNHCR, I feel that I'm standing on the different side of many struggles, but we're all the same. We're all the same, and our fates are interlinked. So if we don't support each other, then we're setting a precedent in the world and saying that it's okay for populations like ours who are relegated to the periphery of what the world decides as important. We're relegated to the periphery of what the world decides is important. We can be forgotten, and structural violence can just keep on changing things. I remember when I came home, as it says in the poem, and my family, my uncles had blood on their clothes, and I just remember saying, at 7 years old, I said to them, if they're going to hurt you, why are we doing this? And they said, well, if we don't make it, and if we don't say anything, no one will ever know that we were here. And that's the story of People Like Us. The next poem I'm going to share is Bullets, and I'm hoping that this first opening set of poems that I share will serve almost as a brief history of what it is we've experienced when it comes to Sudan. This poem is called Bullets, and hopefully it'll shed light on how things began to evolve. My father's voice yanked me awake. My brother had been shot, waiting for that first breath on the other side of the line at a hospital half a world away. I had never felt fear like that. The thing we'd been fighting for the past 11 years had reached the capital and burrowed itself into my next of kin. I'm 21 years old, and I know more about death than about living. My life experiences revolve around massacres and funerals. I know how to start revolutions, but I don't know how to lose myself. I don't know how to give in to this thing called youth because I know how it ends. I call my brother an idiot, and he says, live free or die. He says freedom is a question of life. If you do not reach for it, then you're not alive. This distinct flavor of anarchy stinks of murder, stains like the blood of a good patriot, and leaves a bitter thirst in your mouth only quenched by liberation. That night, burning cities made me feel numb. Bullets made me think of my brother, so I closed my eyes, and I dreamt of blood, of gutted window panes, of Damascus, of Darfur, of Gaza, of Baltimore. And when I awoke, breathing made me feel guilty, makes me feel guilty, like I should have been there, like I should have fought, like I should have stood and faced the firing squad. When you fight for freedom, you stomach pain like that. This body should be lined with bullets, one for each of my brothers and sisters who stopped a bullet for me. It is the mark of our generation. We are more accustomed to the weight of Molotov cocktails on our bodies than we are to the embrace of one another. But I don't want that kind of wisdom. I'm still too young for that kind of pain. I want to wake up in a time where civil disobedience doesn't end in death, where children aren't born under the full moon of revolution, where I haven't lost more people than there are years in my life. This changes you. Not in some earth-moving, ground-breaking kind of way, but bit by bit and with incredible stillness. It's the little things, like how I cringe at the word protest, like how I don't trust anyone who isn't fighting, like how I am as accustomed to sleeping bodies as I am to dead ones, because it's all the same. My brother hears me frowning through the phone. He says, "Smile, you'll live longer." Thank you. The next piece is called Dr. Poem. With this one, I always joke that I'm not very good at naming my poems, so someone else must name my children. You can laugh, it's okay. This poem, I think a lot of us, we don't know how to explain this. I think for me, I became a speaker when I was 10 years old. I started writing poetry when I was 7. I'll explain more later, but I became an activist, an advocate, and a public speaker when I was 10, speaking about Darfur. And I just turned 30 in October last year. Never thought I'd make it, but I'm glad we did. And I'm still fighting the same struggle. And I think what's fascinating about that is that we grow up to become the people we wish for as kids. But what ends up happening is we're pulled back into the cycle of trying to make sure everyone is okay. The first time I really understood what responsibility meant, that responsibility that our family carried, besides how it felt when I was a child advocating, was when I went back to Sudan in 2013 in the summer. And I volunteered in Abshok camp, clinic, and in the birthing hospital in Al-Fashir. This is what I saw. His daughter was dying, so he begged my father to look after her. My dad said, "Don't worry, bones heal. It's the waiting that gets you." In that moment, I was convinced that my father could fix everything. I am not my father. I stare at my hands each day, wondering when they'll look like his. It was midday, and the doctors were stressed but still moving. I was working in the only birthing hospital for miles in my homeland, Darfur. When I go home to Darfur, they call it community service. The prodigal daughter returns from America to heal her people with the things she learned in her ivory tower. But there are things in medicine we don't have scientific names for. I was one of 6 doctors. I am not a doctor. When they brought in our patients with all that blood on the outside of their bodies, and the tears and dust, and the mothers wondering if they could resurrect the earth to plead with the angels of death on their behalf, the operation room became a trial, the scalpel a gavel, and every doctor a perjurer on this broken witness stand. This isn't how it was meant to be. We were arbiters of death. It's not how it was meant to be. When my cousin's gut split open and the confetti of his gut littered the floor. When the illness came for the girl across the street in broad daylight, when my uncle drank the river through his lungs, when my brother caved to the embrace of the second bullet, I wished I were my dad, or God, or doctor, or someone, a doctor, a doctor, a doctor. What do you say when their first question is about the war? What do you say when they hate you for bringing them back? What do you do when they bomb the hospital so you have to operate without borders? Or when the insurance won't cover the operation and you still can't afford it either? or when they hold you at gunpoint for transporting vaccinations until after the war so the children can live until after the war. I still don't know what comes after the war. What do you do when the husband won't sign the consent form for his wife's operation because a fully conscious woman didn't have that right in my country? When I tell you misogyny is life-threatening, when I tell you the patriarchy can kill you, this is what I mean. In one day, an entire would-be classroom full of infants passed through our hallways, each of them fighting for their lives without any knowledge of how many of us had to fight for it first. I'm ashamed to admit the guilt of being a doctor in the war zone, bringing children into Armageddon, but they have to understand that their lives matter, and I can't fix anything, but I can make them breathe, breathe, breathe. Thank you. Okay. The second to last poem I'll share is Head Over Heels. You heard Matthew talk about it earlier, the numbers and the effect that they have. But a lot of people don't understand the meaning behind the numbers, and that's why I wrote Head Over Heels. They hand me the microphone as my shoulder sinks under the weight of this stress. The woman says, "The 1 millionth refugee just left South Sudan, can you comment?" I feel my feet rock back and forth on the heels my mother bought, begging the question, do we stay? Or is it safer to choose flight? My mind echoes through the numbers. 1 million gone, 400,000 dead in Darfur, 2 million displaced, and this lump takes over my throat as if each of those bodies found a grave right here in my esophagus. Our once country, all north and south and east and west, so restless, the Nile couldn't hold us together, and you ask me to summarize. They talk about the numbers as if this isn't still happening, as if 500,000 didn't just die in Syria, as if 3,000 aren't still making their final stand at the bottom of the Mediterranean, as if there aren't entire volumes full of fact sheets about our genocides, and now you want me to write one. Fact. We never talked over breakfast because the warplanes would swallow our voices. Fact, my grandfather didn't want to leave home, so he died in a war zone. Fact, a burning bush without God is just a fire. I measure the distance between what I know and what it's safe to say on a microphone. Do I talk about sorrow, displacement? Do I mention the violence, how it's never as simple as what you see on TV? How there are weeks worth of fear before the camera's on? Do I tell her about our bodies, how they are 60% water, but we still burn like driftwood? Do I tell her the men died first, mothers forced to watch the slaughter? That they came for our children, scattering them across the continent until our homes sank at the bite of the bomb? That even castles sink at the bite of the bomb? Do I mention the elderly, our heroes, too weak to run, too expensive to shoot? How they would march them, rifles at their back, into the fire? How their walking sticks kept the flames alive? It sounds too harsh for a bundle of wires and an audience to swallow. Too relentless, like the valley that filled with the putrid smoke of our deaths. Is it better in verse? Can a stanza become a burial shroud? Will it sting less if I say it softly? Will the pain leave when the microphone does if you don't see me cry? Will you listen better? 30 seconds for the sound bite and 3 minutes for the poem. Why does every word feel like I'm saying my last? My tongue goes dry, the same way we died, becoming ash without ever having been coal. I feel my left leg go numb and realize that I locked my knees, bracing for impact. I never wear shoes I can't run in. Thank you. Thank you, guys. I think I'm going to make an artistic choice in this moment. Ask for forgiveness, not permission. I said it was the second to last poem, but is the audience okay with one more poem? Okay. The people have spoken. So, as I said, my poems tend to follow the history, a brief history of what happens in Sudan, but also in our lives. The personal becomes global when you are in the middle of something that is so all-encompassing. Like the fact that we are even in America because my family escaped from Sudan to Yemen and then came on the visa lottery. So I am myself a former refugee. I'm an indigenous African woman, I'm a poet, and I'm a scientist. Right now, I wanted to share this second to last poem before I go into the final part, because there's one important piece of the history that I realized was missing from the original lineup. This poem is called Beyond the Screen, or Blue for Sudan. Has anyone heard of Blue for Sudan? Did anyone hear that Rihanna talked about Sudan? So there was this moment of hope amidst all the despair. And in that moment, it was very hard to capture what it is we were all feeling. But this poem captures that. And then we go to where we are now after this. This poem is called Beyond the Screen, or Blue for Sudan. My plane lands in Al-Fashir and I instantly fall 20 years backwards in time. Dirt roads and nameless streets, my earliest memories almost perfectly preserved. My younger cousin tells me to smile. The dog filter selfie on her hijab makes it easier to do. I tell her how magical it is to feel like we've grown up together, even though I've only known her for 2 years. The phone between us changes what it means to be family, as we parse through the wreckage of what was and try to write anew, to see the world through one another's eyes. A few weeks later, the revolution begins, and the same VPN I downloaded to get filters in the Sahara with my cousin is the only thing connecting me to the outside world. They say our lives will never be the same because of technology. I say technology will never be the same because of us. I'm drawing water from a reservoir to help my great aunt with laundry one day. I'm documenting network interruptions across the city the next. We can't know how crucial a viable network is until you've spent a generation or generations in isolation. You can't know how powerful an electric grid is until you've marched on a moonless night. You can't know how important a water pump is until you've shut down an entire hospital to dig a well. You can't take an entire country offline and have no one notice. In an attempt to crush the popular uprising, the military issues a media blackout, shutting down the internet nationwide. Days offline turn into months, and still, Blue for Sudan trends worldwide, and still, the revolution is not only televised, but also broadcast, posted, shared, reshared, transmitted. We distribute codes and tips for how to get around network blocks, show how to find shelter, how to successfully carry out a non-violent revolution, how to crowdfund freedom. There is no behind the screen anymore. You can no longer create something without thinking about the people who use it. A country stuck backwards 20 years in time can catapult forward at the speed of light, or at least the speed of ideas. In a time more rife with questions than answers, every one of us becomes an answer as we amplify our voices, rectify the record, shape the world one contribution at a time, one machine, one woman, one job, one protest, one meme, one headline at a time. My hands shake as I type, as I sit, as I travel, as we lurch forward one advancement at a time, each piece bringing every one of us closer to our own self-actualization. I think the world becomes itself each time one of us finds fulfillment. I think the world becomes itself each time one of us finds ourselves. I found myself on a screen for the first time in the year 2006 when I saw my great-grandparents' house on the computer, thousands of miles away, as we took a break from the constant pain of genocide to memorize the shape of our city, just in case it didn't last another day. Just in case it didn't last another day. Well, give me 1 second. Such a suspenseful thing. It happens, guys. Just in case it didn't last another day, in a time, just in case it wouldn't last another day. I never imagined that 12 years later, the dictator would fall, that 12 years later, our voices would be heard, that 12 years later, people would look at high-altitude balloons and think we could use that environmentalists would plant trees with drones, that mothers and daughters would break age-old stereotypes at the touch of an app. I never imagined that 12 years later, I would be standing in the same house next to that young woman who shares my face, my family tree, and a million pictures between when we meet and when we see each other next. Our hearts full as we prepare to move forward, armed with nothing but our phones, our smiles, and the sheer conviction to shape our world a little better this time around. Thank you. Ooh, that was a close one. Now it's the final poem. So there was that moment of hope that Anne will talk about more, and we'll talk about it together some more. And I hope you are all feeling like we're bringing you along on this journey with us. The final step of where we are right now is that final piece of that history, Sudan Baladi, what happened for the past 10 months. I wrote this just after the most recent war started. Another war came crashing down on our bodies. The cut of a broken piece and the bite of a broken promise are the same, except with the first one, death follows and takes everyone around you. Back home, our skin is green because we're full of life, but a full life looks so different when it's poured out onto the rubble, rotting in the streets. Every university became a grave, every garden a final resting place. Our brothers and sisters fall faster than we can dig the holes. Bloodlines burned, singed to ash, to soil, to sand, to nothing, to dust. On the receiving end of the bullet is a little girl, a mother, a family, a home. Airstrikes Sakhoy, Dana, airstrikes Sakhoy, Dana, blood in the streets of Khartoum and Al Ubaid, blood in the wadis of Niyala and Janana, blood in the mountains of Al Fashir, the pyramids of Marawi, blood across the skies of our beautiful country, Sudan, Baladi. Who did this to you, my love? Who stripped you bare and turned all your children loose? The bodies fall, they don't stop, the killing starts, we don't run, hoping against hope that it's a mistake, that if we sit quiet and still enough, maybe it'll stop, that if our hearts beat loudly enough, they'll know that we're human, that we bleed the same blood, who decides who lives or dies. My uncle Abdul Aziz walked home from prayer. The bomb soared down from above, took him and 4 neighbors away from us. Sunrise saw my cousin Ammar on the way to college. My uncle Ibrahim resting at home. Each found a bullet, each found an end without question. My uncle Ibrahim Ahmed lost his life when the hospital shuttered, became more dangerous than the disease that robbed him. I held my mother as we cried for her brother, for all of our people across Sudan, one on the first day, one on the second, another soon after. Our families broke fast together one night and planned burials together by morning. The next day comes and there's nowhere to run. My people go missing one by one and my country falls to pieces. Roads covered, rubble still bleeding, sent to the bottom of a crater, reduced to a footnote in a world said to be in crisis. First orphans, now refugees. For the first time, the second or the third home is burning. See the buildings flashing, see the fire crashing, hear the people evaporating before our eyes. The hospitals filled with the wounded, and our lungs filled with ash, and the hospitals shuttered, and the borders too. And the headlines named our killers, but not us. And the world keeps moving. And their names turn to memories in our mouths. Their names turn to memories in our mouths. A country without its people. A people robbed of time. How can I explain what it's like to sleep and not wake up? Or to wake up and know that it happened again, and you are oceans away, crying, screaming, for our voices to be heard. Dying for our lives, literally dying for our lives. In my country, wars have ended, but peace has never come. Who pulled the trigger? Who bought the bullets? Who sold the guns? Who will stop the war? Who will bring the peace? Who decides who lives or dies? Who decides who lives or dies? My country, Sudan, Baladi, my love. Who did this to you? My country, can you hear me? My country, can you hear me? Thank you, everyone.
Brava, Emi, and hello, everybody. I'm Ann Curry, and it's really good to see all of you here. Are you holding up okay? Good, good. Hope so. Perhaps because I've reported 8 times from Sudan, from Khartoum, Darfur, the Nuba Mountains, and South Sudan, and because I've interviewed presidents and rebel leaders and generals and also civilians who were caught in the violence, I was invited here to say just a few words about what's happening now in Sudan and to have a conversation on stage with Emi before she shares more of her poetry. It's important to know that there was every reason for hope among the culturally rich people of Sudan, that after many years, peace had finally come, when suddenly war erupted 10 months ago. Now nearly 8 million people have fled their homes, more than 65% of them children. As Matt said earlier, today Sudan is suffering one of the largest displacement crises in the world. Words fail to convey just how desperate the situation has become, with millions of traumatized and vulnerable people on the move, searching for safety and just the basic necessities, including and especially food. Climate change as well as war has been destroying crops and livestock, and children have now begun dying of malnutrition and disease. Famine looms, in part because it's so very difficult to get any help inside the country. The UN has called the suffering of Sudan epic, and yet, as many of you here know, the world knows little, if anything, about it. This reminds me of an experience I had when I entered a refugee camp on the edge of Darfur. I locked eyes with a boy and instinctively raised my camera to document the war's toll on children. But after I took the picture, a wave of guilt hit me. I was asking myself how I could have taken something, a photograph from a child, when a man stepped up and said, "Thank you for taking his picture. Thank you for coming here and taking all of our pictures, because now the world can at least know we exist." It matters to the people of Sudan that we know what is happening to them, just as it would matter to any one of us that our suffering is not in silence. Let us then welcome back one who breaks the silence about Sudan so we can hear its people, Emi Mahmoud, also now known as Emi. Welcome back.
Thank you, Sarah.
Emi, let's begin at the beginning. You talked about being very young when you wrote your first poem. You were a child and you were writing about the horrors of war at a very tender age. Yet, as you grew up, you grew into this woman who studied anthropology and the sciences, including global health at Yale. Still, you insisted on focusing on poetry as a way of maybe bringing the entire world into kind of an awakening about what was happening about Sudan. Why did you decide to continue this when you were studying that?
Thank you so much, and thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, for being here. For me, it's almost funny to think how I started. I was 7. My first poem was when my teacher, Miss Weinstein, said, "A poem is something that rhymes about something you care about." So my first poem started like this: "Lions are light brown. I think they like to sit down." And I went home, and it was on manila paper, very slanted, tiny scribbled writing, and I read it to my parents, and they said, "You're a poet." That's how I became a poet. But
Parents are so influential.
when I started writing about Darfur, that feeling, that initial feeling that someone had to speak about what it is that we were feeling, that I didn't understand why no one was saying anything. You know, I was 7 when I came back after that first poem that I shared. I was 7. I came back to 2nd grade. My teacher says, "How was your summer?" And I just lie because I was 7 years old.
Sure,
I
you
didn't
didn't
know
know
what to say.
what to say.
But it continued over time. At 10 years old, I decided, who's speaking for my cousins, the ones that I might never see again? And the reality is that as I got older, I realized that there are probably a lot of people who are in that same position that I was at that age. And I shudder to think that I'm an adult in this world where I could know about what's happening maybe in Syria or like Ukraine or Gaza or any of these places and be someone who sees something is happening and not say anything, and then later that child grows up and tells me, when my people were suffering, you know, no one said anything. And I still remember, for me, the biggest thing was all the people who supported us and believed us about Darfur, as I mentioned earlier, or people who were survivors of previous genocides, whether it was, you know, Rwanda, the Holocaust, so many other terrible things that happened in our lives. I myself was born in 1993, yeah. So think about how many incidents have happened in my lifetime alone.
So you really needed to continue to make sure you need to be a part of waking up the world. You say that, and let's talk about the poetry, the art itself. You say you choose poetry to continue this work because it's so visceral. Does that mean that you are finding it a release as you write because it allows your emotions to come up? Or are you saying that it's visceral in the sense that it unleashes something in the reader or the listener that allows them to come closer to the subject? Which of those two is the priority?
I love how you say it. For me, personally, the reason that I write and the reason I share are different. I write to engage with the world around me and essentially process what's going on. I always say that I've never written any poem without crying either from laughter or sadness. Because the reality is those emotions are going to come out in some way. I think the world would be a better place if more people were poets, because you'd be more in touch with your emotions. So for me, to process those emotions, that's why I write. But the reason that I share is any place that I've ever shared, someone has always come up to me afterwards and said, you know, I'm from such and such place and this happened to me, you know. I'm from Ukraine and this happened to me. I'm from, you know, it's just painful. But I pray for a day where I perform something and it is simply a relic of history and not something that's currently happening right now. So the reason I share is because I think someone needs to hear it, and I'm hoping to move something. The last thing I'll say about poetry itself, even though I studied anthro and mobile, like you said, is that I think that when you reach people where they least expect to be reached, that's when you can really move something. I believe that if you speak to somebody politically, they'll respond politically. If you speak to them academically, they'll respond academically. If you speak to them with hate, they'll respond with hate. But if you speak with your humanity, then they're compelled to respond with their humanity. And I find no better way to do that than with poetry.
And poetry also, there you go. In addition to being a way that allow people to process their emotions and to be connected to how they're feeling about things, there is something that intrigues us when it comes to the choice of language, the choice of words and how they go together and how they kind of aid us in feeling and thinking things. I mean, when you write about something you're so passionate about, do the words come spilling out? I mean, is it just like, or is it a struggle to find just the right word to capture what you're trying to say?
Some poems, I think it's funny, one of my favorite memories is my poetry coach, Alicia Harris, because I started in slam. I started slam poetry in that space. It's how I became the world champion. She always says that sometimes, some poems, you'll be in the shower and then they'll just be done. You know, so some poems will just come like that. But the reality is that, yes, some of my poems, they come like that from the feelings. But a lot of my poems, the majority of them, they really come to fruition in the editing process. I think we talked about this before. that we poets, we say, oh, you have to kill your darlings. But I think he said that there was something a little bit different that journalists say. But there are these moments, yeah.
Yeah,
He said it's dark.
not good.
I was like,
not good.
she hasn't told me, so I'm not sure what it is, but I'll trust you for saying that. But
No, because you're really under fire, you're really stressed out, and you're just blurting it out. No, I'm not sharing it here on this elegant stage.
tell me after.
Okay.
But what's so special about that editing process and that community, I think that's something special about spoken word poetry. As Indigenous women with a language that is not written, for us, our history, our oral history is passed down through family lines. And that's what's so painful about what's happening in Sudan and what happened in Darfur, and still happening right now in so many places. For me, I know that my family history is an oral tradition, and so is how it is we tell our stories and things. When you lose pieces of those puzzles, when you lose the people who are essentially the holders of our own history because of violence, because of genocide, you essentially lose part of a collective identity or a collective history. So for me, that community aspect of the poetry and why it is I keep writing till now is because I feel that sometimes, I'm still trying to carry on that history. And, whether I jokingly by a lot of my Sudanese friends and family get called, what is it called? They jokingly call me a hakkam or a kandak or any of those amazing, powerful women in the past. I'll tell another story another time about what a hakkam is, but they're these warrior poets that are part of our history.
Oh, warrior poets are part of Sudanese history.
Yeah.
That's really interesting finding. I think that would be worth
And they're only
investigating.
women.
And they're only women, and that makes a lot of sense to me. But I think that it's interesting because I've heard poets talk about, and also writers of other kinds of, in other forums, talk about, you talked about being in the shower, and it comes to you. Some poets have talked about this idea that it's almost like in the wind, and you have to run to the paper in time to catch it before it continues past. In other words, and it would seem to me, based on what you've just said, there's a kind of a openness you have because of your experiences and your talents. There's a kind of a place for that wind to pass, and for you to hear that wind and catch it before it right. Does this make any sense at all?
It makes perfect sense, but you said passing wind.
No, okay, I didn't mean that. You know what? We needed that laugh. So, okay, I'm glad I said that, actually.
It's a good thing.
You mentioned being...
my answer is yes.
Yes.
My very short answer is that it really helps to have a notes app now because I used to have to dig for the paper.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, it's so, they say that you've learned a language. You've learned a language when you can speak it in your dreams. So,
Yes.
for example, when I was learning French in college or whatever, they would say, oh, when you start dreaming in French, you'll know you learned it. Yes, I dream in French, but I write poems in my dreams. So
Oh, that's very cool.
a lot of times
that's
I'll wake
worth
up.
aspiring to be able to
No,
do
but
something
that's
like
the
that.
wind. So I wake up and I
Yeah.
have to get the paper and write down what I wrote in my dream.
That's very cool. I'm a photographer. I think of photographs in my dreams. So
There we
maybe it is
go.
where we put our attention, We put our attention to something. You talked about being a slam world champion, slam poet. You've also given a TED Talk. You've also, as we know, you've become a Goodwill Ambassador. What would you say is the power in poetry as a force for good?
I think I would be totally remiss if I didn't mention that my godparents and my family are here. My brother, Nazar, and my godfather, Timothy, is the founder of SNCC, and my godparents were civil rights activists. And I mention this because a lot of us come from this long tradition of people who have used, whether it's spirituals or poetry. We were just looking at a poem that my goddad wrote for high school and things. Poetry to really capture the essence of protest. I think it is a protest art, and I think it's something that really, really captivates and changes how people feel. And I think it's so important for the advocacy that we do, because a lot of times when you want to say something about people who are not protected at all in any way by the world it is that we live in, sometimes you have to put it in a poem, and that's what I say in Head Over Heels, for anyone to even listen. And at times it can be painful, but when you reclaim that process, it becomes something that is almost like it gives us strength. This one poem that I'm going to share afterwards, a lot of times when I read it, and many people say this, that when I'm talking, I'll make jokes about different things, but when I'm reading the poetry, something else takes over, because I really do believe that when I'm bringing those people into the space and entrusting you with whether it's my family history or the pain it is that we were dealing with, or the tradition that I grew up in, all of the work that was done before us, I'm giving you that trust because sometimes I feel that part of that spirit is entombed in that. What does that mean in a more like scientific way? I mean that I'm bringing into existence almost the lived experiences that would be otherwise forgotten or erased. So that's why, yeah.
Well, on that note then, let's all put our hands together to warmly welcome Emi back to center stage.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for that. That was incredible. So as I briefly mentioned, this one poem called Mama. Every time I read it, I think of my grandmother and my godmother and so much more, but I think something else takes over because I'm going through those lived experiences and bringing them into the space. And so I always thank everyone for listening because it means that you're giving honor and respect to my family and my people. I think that what's happening in Sudan will never change if we don't lift up the women who are at the forefront of change all the time. We're the buffer between society and chaos and oblivion. And when chaos happens, people lean on women. But afterwards, when it's time to write the peace agreements or the constitutions or whatever, people tend to forget that we exist. But thankfully, that's going to change. I myself worked on the peace agreement and walked 1,000 kilometers across Sudan before all of it changed. That hope hopefully will come back if we remember this. So this poem is Mama, and then I'll close with a different poem that I won't give away in a second. So this is Mama. I hope it inspires you as my matriarchs have all inspired me. I'm surprised you didn't clap about lifting up women. How do you feel about that, audience? And you can react to this poem, snapping and things like that. Don't be scared. Okay. So I'm walking down the street when a man stops me and says, "Hey, yo, sister, are you from the motherland? Because my skin is a shade too dark not to have come from foreign soil. Because this garment on my head screams Africa. Because my body is a beacon calling everyone to come flock to the motherland. I'm like, yeah, I'm from Sudan. Why?" He said, "Yes, you is, because you got a little bit of flavor in you. Don't get me wrong. I'm just admiring what your mama gave you." He said that. Let me tell you something about my mama. She can reduce a man to tattered flesh without so much as blinking. Her words fester beneath your skin, and the whole time you won't be able to stop cradling her eyes. Because my mama is a woman, flawless and formidable in the same step. Woman walks into a war zone and has warriors cowering at her feet. My mama holds all of us in her face, in her body, in her blood, and blood is no good once you let it loose, so she always holds us close, keeping us safe from caving in. When I was 7, my mama cradled bullets in the billows of her robes. That same night she came home and taught me how to get gunpowder out of cotton with a bar of soap. Years later, when the soldiers held her at gunpoint and asked her who she was, she said, "I am a daughter of Adam. I'm a woman. Who the hell are you?" And the last time we went home, we watched our village burn. Soldiers pouring blood from civilian skulls as if they too could turn water into wine. The woman who raised me turned and said, "Don't be scared. I'm your mother. I'm here. I won't let them through." My mama gave me conviction. Women like her inherit bruised wrists, tired eyes, and titanium-plated spines. The daughters of widows wearing the wings of amputees. They carry countries between their shoulder blades. Now, I'm not saying that dating is a first world problem, but these trifling guys seem to be the kind who'll quote Rumi, but not know what he sacrificed for war. Who'll fawn over Lupita, but turn their racial filters on. Who take their politics with a latte when I take mine with tear gas. Every guy I meet wants to be my introduction to the dark side, wants me to open up this obsidian skin and let him read every tearful page, because what survivor hasn't had her struggle made spectacle? Don't talk about the motherland unless you know that being from Africa means waking up an afterthought in this country. Don't talk about my flavor unless you know that my flavor is insurrection, it is rebellion, resistance. My flavor is burden, it is grit, and it is compromise, and you don't know compromise till you rebuilt your home for the third time, without bricks, without mortar, without any other option. I turned to the man and said, my mother and I don't walk the streets alone back home anymore. Back home, there are no streets to walk anymore. Thank you. And now for the final poem. So this poem, I don't think anyone knows about it. I mentioned history a lot, and I said that the poems before, especially Mama, were an homage to those who came before us. But this is a celebration of the future, and I hope that the next time we gather, we'll be celebrating a future that's going to include all of us. And that's why I'm so proud to be here at the Kennedy Center with UNHCR, with all of you. It means so much to me because that future is so important, and if we don't draw it together, we won't be included in it together. Where I get hope from is my youngest sister, Muntaha, and all of my siblings, including Imam, who's here right now. But Muntaha is 7 years old, and she knows nothing about the genocide. She's never heard the word Bashir. She doesn't know anything about the violence. She doesn't know about the war. She's a happy, young child with a bright future ahead. And so for me, that generation, having another generation here who already believes in a world where there isn't war, that to me is more than enough of an incentive to keep moving and to create a world like that. So for me, as an indigenous African woman, a Black woman in America, from Philly, all these different things, former refugee, the most important thing to me in the world is seeing that future and helping create it together. If you ever talk to Muntaha, you'll know that violence and structural violence are not going to exist in this future world if there's more people like her. This poem is still untitled. Everyone hates being a teenager, but can you imagine being a teenager in a world like this? Displaced, dispossessed, and disenchanted. My own sense of self put on the line in the cruelest way at the most vulnerable age. The uncle says, if you grow up to marry someone outside of the tribe, your children will not belong to us. They will belong to someone else. Your brothers can, but you, never. The finality of the word, never. I feel the fire of protest in my belly as he answers why I manage. Because you're a girl. Because you're a girl. The words he didn't say cut just as deeply as those he did. Because you're a girl, you can't. Because you're a girl, speak less. Because you're a girl, be humble, be soft. But if you speak up, you're too soft or too hard. And if you want more from life, then you are greedy, selfish, ungrateful. You are lucky enough just to be acknowledged. So don't question it because you are a girl. I grew more silent with each next word he spoke. It's lucky, really, that your parents have a son, he says. His words cast shackles across my skin as I begin to mourn all of the matriarchs in my family. My own name, Imtithal Ibrahim Imam Mahmoud Hassan, an homage to all of my fathers and my father's fathers. A history of invisible mothers denied their rightful place both in practice and in our own memories. Me, a firstborn daughter disinherited of her own self-worth, holding back tears I did not know were existential. Girl echoes through the chambers of my mind like a filthy word. I begin to distance myself from the notion, only to feel the heart of every firstborn daughter and secondborn and third. I felt I should cry. I felt the spirit in me yell with rage. My face grew hot. My body shook and my hands did too. I looked at him and I laughed heartily. You don't know anything. I said. Dura mater, tough mother, the outermost membrane of the human brain, just below the skull, and the only thing standing between you and oblivion. You still want to tell me you can tell girls what to do? I hid behind science to take away the sting of what he said, leaning on that tough mother, strong enough to fight the exterior, yet thorough enough to protect the contents within. I became the dura mater, shielding myself from hurt, from words that sting and cut and maim, keeping true to the contents within. The heart of a woman is strong, but the voice of a little girl couldn't speak up to him as I can now. If he had dared speak to me as I am now, as a dura mater I am now, if he had dared say those words to me now, and not at that vulnerable age, I would have turned to the heavens, lifted my hands in prayer. I would have called on every one of my hidden mothers. I would have said to his eternal awe, give me a daughter. Give me a daughter to change the world. Give me a daughter to shake the room with her voice. Give me a daughter to break tradition, to take up space, to make good trouble. Give me a daughter to break every ceiling, climb every mountain, wade through the noise of doubt and trepidation just by the strength of being her. Give me a daughter to speak, not only when spoken to be, not only when asked to succeed, not only when permitted to. Give me a daughter so she can take her rightful place as a full and unencumbered equal of this planet among 4 trillion other daughters, taking their rightful place and leading us into a limitless future. Give me a daughter like Mother Earth. Give me a daughter like Maryam and Khadija. Give me a daughter like Venus, a planet so gorgeous it shines brighter than all of the stars in the sky, yet so deadly its atmosphere can melt even metal. Give me. And still, there are countless sonnets, books, and poems written about her. Give me a daughter who'll write her own sonnets, books, and poems about her. Give me a daughter who'll be her own historian, who'll write her own story in any form she pleases, who'll walk the path she chooses, who won't belong to anyone but herself. Give me a daughter that she may never know the pain of dispossession or the sting of the words no or never, or you are not strong enough, or you are not quiet enough, or you talk too much, or don't talk enough, or you are too pretty, or you're not pretty enough, or you're too smart, or you're not smart enough, or you are too much and you are not enough. Give me a daughter who will never understand what it is I'm talking about here, because she will not have lived that experience of inequality. Yes, you can say yay. Amen. Give me a daughter who'll say, because you're a girl, people really used to say that. Give me a daughter so she can dream higher than even the dreams all of my mothers gave to me, that even the dreams I will give to her. Give me a daughter so I can raise her to be all that she wants to be. And when she cries, let me be there to hold her. And when she laughs, let me be there to listen. And when she lives, let me be there to celebrate every waking moment. Give me a daughter who'll change the world. To every daughter born or chosen, seen or unseen, future or present, lift your head up. Your crown is slipping. Give me a daughter, give me a daughter. Give me a daughter so humanity can succeed. I never saw that man again. But when I told my parents, they too laughed. My father said, come here. And we sat all together and learned all of the names of the matriarchs in the family. Not just my mothers and grandmothers, but my aunts and great aunts too. He had memorized every name, my mother too. Amira, Halima, Amna, Hawa, Afaq, Loretta, Asha, Lulu, you are and always will be more than enough. He said, you, my child, are the best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
Emi Mahmoud, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. If you want more information about Sudan, there is a QR code, by the way, as you exit at the entrance, that will lead you to a video that's worth watching and worth sharing if you like it. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. It's been an honor.
Thank you for joining us at Millennium Stage. For more information about upcoming shows, please check out the Kennedy Center